and welcome to the Takarazuka Fan Podcast, a podcast where fans from around the world talk about Takarazuka and its world. Today's topic is going to be questions and answers. We have some questions from listeners, which thank you by the way, and we also have some questions that we have stolen from the internet, mostly from the Takarazuka Live Journal, where lots of questions have been posted over the year, and we hope that we can answer them, as well as the original posters and answerers did. So to start out today, let's talk about who's here on the show. Let's go alphabetically. Who's here today?
I'm Caroline from the Netherlands.
Jeanette from Germany.
Jen from New York.
Lisa, also from Germany.
So, Caroline, what's your happy thing this week?
My happy thing is actually related to Lisa and Jeanette. I visited them in Germany last weekend and we went to see the German production of Elizabeth. And then on the car on the way back, we were listening to the Mizumatsuki soundtrack of Elizabeth and singing together. And it was just such a wonderful moment of theatre love and Takarazuka love. It made me really happy.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish I was there too. Okay, let's see. How about you, Jeanette?
I was going to pick the same thing.
That's...
I really miss you guys. I had an awesome weekend. The show was really interesting because some accidents happened. And and I always connect the German Elisabeth with the Takarazuka version. So it always kind of relates to me to Takarazuka in any way. And my mother finally admitted to watch the Takarazuka version together with me because we made her join us watch the German version. And it makes me really happy.
Victory!
Cool.
Yay! Yay!
Okay, now I'm really curious. What kind of accidents happened?
Well,
After 5 minutes,
it weren't even
the
5
fire
minutes.
alarm went off. Or not even 5 minutes, the fire alarm went off, and the Lucchini looked really desperate, and Toad kept singing. And then they made an announcement like, okay, this is not just training, please leave the theater. And I think it was a mist machine that caused the alarm to go off, so it was nothing serious.
Yeah.
And the second accident was I don't know the name of the song, unfortunately, only in German, which is Nichts ist schwer. And they have this gondola for a Ferris wheel that goes up and down, and it got stuck like 1 meter above the stage.
Oh no!
Yes. And they handled it well. It was a premiere weekend, and they handled it well. It was interesting. I think I won't forget that.
One of my favorite parts was...
This is why opening night's fun.
One of my favorite parts was how different members of the theater staff came out to apologize. And I don't know how they determined who had to apologize, but apparently every person who works on Elizabeth is a young woman. I don't know why, but that seemed to be the case.
Yes.
Oh, man. Oh, this is why opening nights are so much fun.
I felt a bit sorry for
their second show.
I felt a bit sorry for the actors too, because both Toad and Elizabeth were the cover cast. And at least Toad looked so confused until Lucchini was like, no, stop singing, we're actually evacuating the theater. Boss, no, stop.
Yeah, and
Lucchini takes charge.
When the gondola it was coming down again. It's the song where Elizabeth and Franz declare their love for each other and he gives her the necklace. And when the gondola was coming down, there's this point where they're supposed to both get off again.
Backwards.
And as they were finishing the song, you hear someone yelling from the audience, stay where you are, don't come down. And we're like, what the hell happened? And then we noticed that the gondola would just stop there. And then they just started closing the curtain and saying, so yes, guys, 1 second, we have a small technical difficulty here.
No.
We'll try to get them down as quickly as possible. We are very sorry for the inconvenience.
Yes.
So yes, the joys of live theatre.
Yes.
Yes, that's what makes it fun. Did you have a happy thing this week, Lisa?
I was going to say the same, but I think I'm going to mix it up a bit. You guys know I love you, right? And I'm going to say the announcement that there will be no vocal cuts for Hot Eyes and Shakespeare. Which makes me really, really happy, because it's one of my pet peeves when you're watching this DVD and the review is really good and suddenly there is no sound or some music that absolutely does not line up with the dance steps.
Yeah.
And song got cut, yay. It mostly happens to the really strong singers too, or the people you like best.
Right.
So I'm happy that
because the good singers always get the good songs and then they get cut. Like, why?
But I'm just very happy that this won't be happening.
It's always the really popular ones.
But I'm just very happy that it won't happen this time.
Yeah. That's cool. That's similar to what I was going to say, because they finally put up the page for the Rurouni Kenshin DVD, and it also will not have any cuts. Yay!
Yay! They're very easy people to please.
Just stop cutting stuff from your DVDs.
Yes. And I'm going to sneak one more happy thing in, because this is a extremely old happy thing, but I rediscover it every 6 years, and it never ceases to amuse me. Has anyone here seen the 2001 Daihatsu commercial with Koju Tatsuki and Minoru Code?
Yes!
Yes. It's for this Daihatsu car. And they are in this car dressed up as Oscar and Andre, and the commercial is all about how roomy this car is. So in the car, they're both in their seats and they're reaching for each other and they're doing the Oscar, Andre, and it's hilarious. So I will put a link in the show notes because it's so funny.
It's so good.
I love that advertisement.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started on our questions. The first one we have is a little long. And it's from a listener called Naomi. And she actually sent the question directly to Carly, and Carly sent it on to us. So I'll read the question out, and then I think we'll see who wants to answer it. But she says, "Hello, Carly. Thank you for allowing me to send you this question via email. My question is about the Japanese perception of the review as it relates to the lesbian, bisexual, and transgender folks. Are Zuka fans and actresses seen as more likely to be gay? I asked this question for two reasons. First, the anime Oran High School Host Club has a trio of minor characters that are parodies of Takarazuka, who are portrayed as lesbians. Does this reflect the general public's perception of Takarazuka? Second, I understand that in Japan, lesbian attraction among girls is somewhat accepted and seen as something one will grow out of. Are fans in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s perceived as strange for devoting themselves to a review that portrays so much romance between female actors?" So I guess I will have Caroline give us her view on things first.
Well, I can answer a bit relating to the second part of the question. I did a presentation for one of my classes about the GLBT community in Japan last semester. And one of the books we use is called Lesbian Voices from Japan. Something that I found really funny as someone who lives in the Netherlands was this chapter about all-girls schools and how when all-girls schools first began in Japan, apparently they had this rule that women were not allowed to be in a room alone in even numbers, because if they were in even numbers, apparently people thought they would start sleeping together. So they always had to have an uneven number so there was someone else to stop it if anything started to happen. Which, yes. And interesting, that same book also had a chapter on the Takarazuka review, which, which also talked about this idea of both Takarazuianas and fans being perceived as possibly being either not straight, or of this idea that girls are more easily attracted to each other, to do with romance as well, the kind of romance that Takarazuka offers, which is perceived as being safer than a lot of the heterosexual media in Japan. But I have to say that most of my Japanese friends who are fans of the review are usually women who are married, or most of the case also heterosexual, have children, and actually don't really think of what happens on stage is something that is a portrayal of homosexual law.
Yeah, I feel like the whole point of Takarazuka is that the otokoyaku are men while they're on stage. Mm-hmm. So if you approach it from that point, it's really not, like you said, a lesbian romance. Mm-hmm. Lisa, what did you think about that question?
I think that this question also has a bit to do with how Takarazuka has been approached by, I'm going to say Western scholars now, even if that is a very far approach. Because usually the debate focuses a lot on gender and gender expectations and sexuality without looking at it simply as theater. I mean, if you look at Shakespeare, for example, also all female roles were played by men. Do we now have a debate about whether every Shakespeare admirer is supposedly gay?
Why don't we?
Yeah, let's turn it around.
On the other hand, I can see why Takarazuka, of course, is a very attractive thing and probably a safer space too, if you are lesbian or bisexual or in any form attracted to women if you are a woman. Because you have a lot more women than you would have in a usual public space. And, well, the fandom at least is a bit made for women by women. Even if that is not the intent behind it, in the end we have a lot more female fans.
Yes. I feel like if you look at it historically too, and we talked about this a little bit when we covered the history of the review and what it was, like when they started it, they used all female actresses just because it made sense economically. It was a little bit cheaper, and they didn't have to train them as much as like a professional male stage actor in the 19 teens. And I think even up through after World War II, the Takarazuka review had an equal audience of male and female. It wasn't until probably in the 60s and 70s that they started bringing in, I think, a lot more pop culture, and I think it started aiming the commercial aspect was more aimed at women. I think that's where it's at now, and I don't think that necessarily points to it being a general public thinking of Takarazuka as something that's a lesbian situation.
I think what's also easily overlooked is that the most enthusiastic fans for any fandom, I think, are usually women.
Yes.
I mean,
that's vocal, at least.
Yes, at least the most vocal, let's put it that way. But also I think the biggest consumer base usually are women in a certain age bracket. And other things just aren't as likely to be thought of as lesbian because you still have men in those.
Right. Actually, you know what? I think this connects with another question we were talking about, which was how many people are actually watching Takarazuka, and what ratio of men to women do you think there is usually in the audience and in the fan clubs? Lisa, do you want to grab that question?
I think we can't debate that we have less men in the general audience than we have women. But I think it's harder to see the men who are actually in the fan clubs, because when you usually see fans, it's either at irimachi or demachi, or during ochakai. And during ochakai, it's a bit like being the one person in the room who does not belong if you're a man. At least it feels like that way for me. You have this room that's full of 100 people and you're the only man. Which probably keeps them from participating, for example, in irimachi a bit. But when you go to the theater, there are actually quite some men who are watching the shows. So it's not a women-only thing. And there are also male fans who are not forced or dragged there by their significant other. So it does have an appeal for men. And it's probably lack of opportunity, or maybe also a bit feeling out of their depth that they are not seeing Takarazuka as much, since it is marketed so heavily at women. Because on shows of retired Takarazuka performers, the OG shows, the audience is quite a bit more mixed, and I don't think that those people just pop out of the woodwork out of nowhere, and suddenly you have a male audience. They must have been there before.
Yeah.
I think Jeanette had something to say about that as well, didn't you, Jeanette, about the OG shows?
Yeah, I've watched 2 OG shows, which are Chicago in 2014 and Alice in 2014. Alice in Wonderland was with Aranke. And I think we all know the Chicago cast by now. And especially with Chicago, there were a lot of single men in the audience. I think some of them were probably friends because they were sitting next to each other. But it was really interesting to see that. Because when I was in Takarazuka and watching the show, I was like, okay, this audience is really what I've heard of to be the Takarazuka audience. Like, ladies, older ladies than I am. And but especially the Chicago audience was very well mixed. And with Alice, one day there were a lot of families actually on the Sunday. So like mom, dad, and their child went to watch the show together. And but I think the men just weren't there because their girlfriend asked them to come with them. I think they really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like, especially in the fan culture, in the fan clubs, there are a lot of men, and I've heard that especially a lot of the money that goes into the Takarazuka, we haven't talked about this a lot, but a lot of the fan clubs are basically there to get money to support the actresses' careers, including when they get professional money for doing advertising. But I've heard that a lot of older men actually, same as the women do, you know, they'll pick a Takara Jane and they will support her financially, but they don't tend to do fan events. They do more private things, especially if they have the money to pay for like a private dinner for two. And so I think for them, you know, the fan culture is not anything they're interested in because they're older businessmen or however that works. But there are also men in the fan clubs, and not even if they're in the fan clubs, a lot of them don't do the irimachi damachi, which is where you see a lot of the fans like out waiting for the actresses. And I think part of that is the fan club wear is not made for men to wear. You know, if it's a little pink sweatshirt, you know, it's not going to fit on a guy. Although if you go, you usually will see at least 2 or 3 guys doing irimachi damachi, especially on the weekends. And I know in one fan club I was in, I made friends with one of the male fans, and he was a doctor. He was like in his 40s or 50s, and he actually came to irimachi and damachi a lot, which was awesome. So I think they're there. They're just maybe a little bit more shy about invading this female sphere of fandom.
Another thing that also just occurred to me was that in an OG show that Rancho Tomo was in, I think the name on Western Netflix is Atelier, and in Japan it's just called Underwear, if I recall correctly. And it's yes, it's called Underwear. It's about a lingerie maker. And in any case, in this show there are several women. Most of the cast is female, and the women working there is only one of them who's actually married, and that happens to be the Takarazuka fan, who literally excused herself from going to a party because she was like, "Oh no, I have theater tickets," and theater tickets was just the English subtitle, and she actually said Takarazuka and held up a pair of opera glasses. And she was like super happy about it, but at the same time, that was the only character in a Japan-produced show that had a happy family life, so to speak, or that had a family to speak of.
Huh. Yeah, I do think a lot of the fans who go tend to be married, who do the fan stuff, irimachi, damachi, they tend to be married with older kids who are at school, you know, who they have the time and they don't have a job and they can go and do that, housewives. But I don't know if that's changing as the culture changes. It'll be interesting to see.
Yes.
Yeah.
The next question we actually got on our podcast blog, and it was from TM. And she said, or he said, "I do have a question. What was the rationale for having Shin Senka or New Senka back in 2000? So I guess I'll grab this question to start. For those of you who don't know, New Senka was what happened back in 2000 is they moved all of the 2nd and 3rd ranked Otokoyaku stars from all of the troops into Senka, which is generally thought of as a small group of very specialized actresses, and they tend to be older, and they take the older roles in the performances. And fans went berserk because they didn't know what was happening. Like, was my star going to be a top star now? Like, what's going on? And at the time, let's see, who moved. So they moved 10 people. From Flower Troop, they took gosh, I'm going blank here. Charlie.
Takumi Hibiki. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Iori Naoka, Shibuki Jun, Hatsukaze Midori came from Moon Troop. From Snow Troop, it was Koju Tatsuki and Shiokaze Ko. From Star Troop, it was MLU and Ayaki Nao. And from Cosmos, it was Kozuki Wataru and who was it? Help.
Nickname?
Judy Sakiho, sorry. I'm going blank here. And so hearing those names, some people are like, oh yeah, I know them. They were top stars. Or they're like, who? So out of that group, like 6 became top stars, I think. And like 4 or 5 actually retired without becoming top stars. And so there's a big kerfluffle. And at the time, the head of the company was Ueda Shinji, who some fans love and some hate. He's the writer for the first Berubara. So that can say it all. And they didn't, the company didn't call it Shinsenka. That was something that fans named it. And they didn't really give an official rationale at the time. They just said, well, you know, they can get some experience going around to different troops because every troop has a kind of a different flavor, so to speak. It's interesting because I think a lot of people, when you think of Senka, you think of the older stars, but actually, historically, Senka used to be huge. It used to be most of the actresses were in Senka, not in individual troops. And there was like a dance Senka, and an opera singing Senka, and an acting Senka, and, you know, and actresses used to move around and be in different shows in different troops a lot more than they are now. And even when most of the modern people who are in Senka were moved in the 70s, they were young and they were thought of as going somewhere. So it wasn't just like a dumping ground for old actresses, which is a horrible thing to say.
Yes, it is.
And it isn't now. And so, I mean, recently, we had some interesting and exciting moves into Senka. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to talk about that at all.
Well, I think the first move into Senka that caught people by surprise was Hokusho Kairi. Because she is not exactly the age bracket that we have seen to be moved into Senka recently. But Michan then went on to become top star of Hoshigumi, and now there have been some more people moved into Senka, younger people, and it seems some of them are eyed for a possible top star career too, although I think that this was not Hankyu's initial reason for moving them there. And I don't think realistically that Hanagata Hikaru, Seijo Kaito, or Sakurama do have a chance at making top star like Hokusho Kairi did. I think Michan was an exception to the rule, but it also seems as if the company wants to keep some of their upperclassmen now, who do not have the option to go onto Star Trek, but who also seem to be too valuable for the company in terms of skills that they want to let them go just yet. Because from my understanding, you can't just say, I want to be transferred to Senka, but you get offered a position in Senka, and then it's up to you if you want to take it or not.
I seem to recall, I forget who it was, one of the recent transfers. She mentioned in an interview that when she was asked about going to Senka, they mentioned how a lot of upperclassmen were also retiring in a lot of the troops, and that Senka is in a position to fill up those spots where upperclassmen are retiring to help give this troops a bit more of a solid background and to help train the younger actresses as well.
That's a good perspective. I know it used to be when I started in the fandom and I watched a lot of late 90s shows, you'd have like 3 or 4 Senka actresses in every show. And nowadays, it's almost, you'll get some like grand theater shows where there's no Senka actresses. And I'm like, no, I want some Senka, because I think they bring a gravity to the roles. It's one thing to have like a 20-something with a mustache and a false beard pretending like they're 80, but I think those Senka stars bring a lot, and they probably teach a lot to the troops while they're there with them rehearsing. So anybody have anything else to add about Senka?
I just think that we should not expect the new Senka to be as successful in producing top stars as the 2000 interlude was.
Yeah. I mean, those actresses that they moved out had done a lot of Shinjin Koen top star roles, and they'd had a lot of Bao Hall and other like lead roles. So everybody knew they were star-tracked, like headed for top stardom. And I think even though Seijo Kaito has had a Shinko lead, has she had a Bao Hall lead? I don't think
so. I'm drawing a blank on Hanagata Hikaru in that respect too. I know that...
she did. She did the one with the cow on the cover.
Oh,
yes. I think it was a shared lead.
50-50, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was called 50-50.
Yeah.
The one with the cow on the cover. Thank you.
That's the best poster ever.
I knew
if you haven't seen the poster for 50-50, go check it out.
I knew immediately what Jen meant when she said the one with the cow on the cover. It works.
There are a couple oddballs thrown into Senka, which I think moves into the question that I wanted to add and ask everyone, because when I was a new fan, I thought I was really proud of myself. This was like back in 2004, 2005, and there wasn't a lot of information on the internet, and I thought I knew a lot. I thought, oh yeah, I've learned so much, and I know that they have top stars and there's 5 troops, and so I went to the theater to see a show, and it turned out to be Nagasaki Shigerezaka, which is set in Nagasaki City, like during the late 1800s. So it's kind of a Nihon Mono, Japanese style show. And I went in and watched it, and I was like, okay, so the male role player with the most stage time must be the top star of this troupe. And I was like, but who's this other guy? There's this other guy who has almost as much time on stage. That's kind of funny. And I kind of like that guy a little bit better. So afterwards, I went home and I did some more research, and I went, oh, no, the person who had all the stage time was Todoroki Yuu? Who's that? So my question for everybody is, Tom? Tell me about Tom. What's going on there? Anybody want to grab that?
I think we all know that feeling of encountering Todoroki Yuu for the first time and wondering, what?
Who are you and why are you stealing my troop?
The idea that Senka has a top star, and especially when she comes into a grand theater show and there's a sort of double lead with the top star, it can be really strange if you don't know her position and have never seen it before, like Jen mentioned. I know the first time I saw it happen, I forget which show it was. I think it might have been Yukigumi's review, Nishikie of the Wind, which had Tom doing the double lead in the review, which was also a bit weird. And I was wondering, who's that? Why is she getting all those top star-like scenes? She's not in the troupe. Who's that? It's strange.
Let's take a step back and let's explain what we mean by a top star in Senka. Lisa, do you want to talk about who was she? Like, where was she top star?
Todoroki Yuu originally used to be top star of Yukigumi way back in... When did she start? 1969? 96, sorry.
She became top star in 96.
In 96.
She joined the review in 85, yeah.
And then she stayed until 2002. And usually a top star would retire when her run is over, at least that's how it's usually done. But Tom just went on to Senka and continued to be the unofficial top star of every troupe she was visiting. So if Tom goes to play with a troupe, she usually gets the whole troupe to play with her, or she gets at least a part of the troupe, enough to put on a show for a smaller theater, like a bow hall show, for example. And there is no debating that Tom will then get the lead role. Even the top star has to take a backseat because Tom is the top star of all top stars.
So let's talk about how we feel about Tom, because we were talking about this before we started recording, and there are some interesting reactions to to Tom, and I think some people have split reactions of Tom when she was top star of Snow Troupe, and then Tom today in her interesting capacity. I don't know. Jeanette, do you want to talk about Tom at all?
Actually, I feel a bit indifferent about Tom because she doesn't appeal to me as a performer. I respect what she's doing because she's good at what she's doing, but sometimes when I see her doing shows with a current troupe, sometimes it feels that she's not fitting in properly. I had that feeling especially when I watched Akatsuki no Roma, which was a Tsukigumi show, I think, in 2006, where she got to play Caesar, I think. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, Julius Caesar.
It was that role. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I know Tsukigumi. I kind of like Tsukigumi, but why is she in there? And because from her acting and performing style, it's you can feel the time, the difference in time when she was a TMS student compared to the actual troupe, and that sometimes throws me a bit off. I enjoy her more actually in Golden Steps, for example, or I really liked her in the review Carol already mentioned, the Yukigumi one, because Nihon Mono is a bit more timeless, or the Nihon Mono style, than it is for the how to describe it, like modern musical shows or modern styled musical shows.
Yeah, I feel like when I saw her in Nagasaki Shigerezaka, it was Nihon Mono too, so she didn't seem too out of place. But I can understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of people were really upset. Like, I can't remember the years exactly, if it was 2007, 2008. She did a couple shows where she was supposed to be like the young romantic heroic lead, and she was playing opposite these Musume Yaku who were probably 20 at the most. And it just seemed like an awkward disconnect. I don't know.
Yeah.
Caroline, how do you feel about Tom?
I have a similar opinion as Jeanette. I loved everything I've seen of her as a top star in Yukigumi. And I've seen a few shows where I really enjoy her, but especially what you just mentioned with the fairly young Musume Yaku, for example, she did fairly recently a show with Hoshigumi called South Pacific. And I believe it was Hinami Fu who played her romantic interest at the time. And Tom has aged really well, but even then you can't deny that there's a really huge age gap in there. And it made it a bit jarring for me to watch the scenes together sometimes. The same happened with Oedipus, which I watched in Japan last year. It was a ball hall show. It was actually a Senka ball hall show with a few performers from other troupes, from the Moon Troupe and from Cosmos Troupe. And for those who don't know the story of Oedipus, it's basically a guy who killed his father and married his own mother without knowing that she was his mother. And then you had Tom as Oedipus, and then you had Nagina Rumi as his mother. And Nagina Rumi does not look old enough to be Tom's mother. There's no amount of makeup you can throw her that will make her look old enough to be Tom's mother.
Yeah. Although, now that you mentioned Oedipus, I think one really cool thing about Tom, still kind of holding the reins, so to speak, is she brings in some really unusual performances, which you usually wouldn't see Takarazuka put on. Like, they also did The Odd Couple.
Yes.
And just kind of cool things.
Yeah, I did like that, yes. Oedipus is a show that, when they announced it, my first reaction was, what? Oedipus in Takarazuka? But it was really well done, and Koyanagi Sensei managed the adaptation really well, and this is something that I do appreciate about Tom, that she brings some very different shows into the reviews once she gets her own lead.
Yeah. Lisa, I don't think you really had a chance to talk about, how do you feel about Tom?
I do appreciate that Tom brings opportunity for a lot of younger performers, because if you get to be especially in one of the smaller Tom shows, you get to be in a usually very unusual setting for Takarazuka, and at the same time, you get to be a bit out of your comfort zone. You are not with the usual top star or with the usual upperclassmen that you would be around, so you have to stand on your own a bit more. But at the same time, there's still some safety because Tom being there is more or less a guaranteed, well-selling, smaller performance. So it's not as if you're as if those underclassmen are risking a lot. At the same time, I think that it's about time for the company to realize that Tom would be much more interesting and much better in a different type of role. Like, stop giving her the young heroes. Give her the older villains. Give her something that actually is more or less tailored to her age.
Although, in a way, Oedipus is kind of a villain. So maybe they're starting to go that way.
Yeah, but then they should also please cast someone who could at least remotely look old enough to be Tom's mother.
Like Miho Keiko would be so perfect.
Yeah, Miho.
Yes. Oh
I
my
would have been
goodness.
okay with Miho Keiko age-wise. Even though she's not quite Tom's age bracket, she's a lot closer than Nagina Rumi, for example.
Yeah.
I have to say, building on what you said about giving young stars a chance to shine, Carly isn't with us, but she put up a review of Lincoln, which is Tom's most recent show, and she was saying something very similar. Like, a lot of the younger underclassmen really had a chance to get some cool roles and do some interesting things. So, I guess for me, I love Tom. I saw her. I saw most of her shows as top star on VHS, and she's the reason that I fell head over heels in love with Nova Bossa Nova. Like, that woman's performance in Nova Bossa Nova I have seen every version of it now. Even some of the ones from the 70s, and like all the Shinjin Koen, I'm in love with the show. But anyway, Tom's version is just above and beyond. It's amazing. If you haven't had a chance to see Tom's Nova Bossa Nova, highly, highly recommend it. I haven't seen as much of her stuff. Just after she joined Senka, I saw a lot of her stuff where she was in the Grand Theater shows. I haven't seen a lot of the ones she's been doing more recently, the smaller productions, so I can't say anything about that. But Tom. We haven't really talked about the fact that she's actually a member of the board of directors of the review.
Yes.
Which is probably why she has a lot of the power that she has. And I know there have only been... The only other top star I know who then went into Senka and did something similar was Haruna Yuri, who was one of the first top stars in the 1970s when Berubara Boom made it so popular. And she actually was top star of Moon Troop for a while, and then she went into Senka, and she did the same thing. She kind of bounced around in different reviews, different troops, and did different shows. So Tom's not the first one to do this, but Haruna Yuri did eventually retire. And I don't know that Tom ever will retire. I think
No.
Well,
I think she loves it too much.
Theory that she's a vampire.
She does age amazingly well. I will give her that.
To be fair, a lot of the Yukigumi top stars age amazingly well. Are we sure that Tom has not infected them with some kind of vampire virus?
It could be passed on from Nibante,
Yes, that you get this,
or from top star to Nibante.
That you get this eternal youth bonus when you were top star in Yukigumi. So I'm leaving now. Bye.
Could be true.
By the way, this is your tie-down present. You'll be young forever.
That would be the best present. Okay, I am going to jump in and have us do a cool opinion question next that we grabbed off of LiveJournal. So I can't remember exactly how long ago this was posted, but the person said they were a new fan and they were curious what you would get rid of, if anything, in Takarazuka, and what would you want to see more of, and why? So, let's see. Caroline, do you want to grab this question? Anything you want to get rid of in Takarazuka, or anything you want to see more of?
Letting reviews can disappear off the face of the earth as far as I'm concerned.
Really?
I can live the rest of my life, never see another Latin review again, and be perfectly happy. To explain a little bit of the background in this, I was born and raised in Brazil, and so a lot of the things that they try to put on are fairly close to home to me, culture-wise. Not everything, because usually they go more to the Spanish-speaking parts. But there were reviews like, for example, Rio de Bravo, which was based in Brazil. And the first time I saw a Latin review, I was like, oh, this is interesting. But then after a while, I realized the Latin scenes in Takarazuka tend to be a lot of the same. It's ruffles and more ruffles, and then
bell pants
feathers in there, and then extra set of feathers because you can never have enough feathers, and random words in Spanish. I don't know, I'm a bit done with it after a while. It's just always, very often, a lot of the same. And I get that it's a kind of a trope that apparently a lot of fans respond very well to, but I wish that if they were trying to do something Latin or try to get something from that kind of culture, they would look more at for inspiration that goes beyond this very stereotyped image of people yelling loudly and wearing a lot of ruffles and a lot of feathers. Yes. This was
Can I just ask a question related to that? Because I spoke with somebody who did Latin dance, and I think they were also from South America, and they said they really didn't like the Latin reviews because the dancing was actually terrible. Like, they didn't move their bodies in the right way, and obviously that probably they didn't have the teachers who taught that. What do you think about that?
Yes, I agree with that. It's to me, it's always a bit of a parody of what people think that Latin dancing looks like, without any of the actual effort to go to the roots or to try to actually emulate what the sort of dancing in those cultures is about. It's a lot of different cultures around. If you're talking about Latin, there's a lot of difference in the types of music and dance that they just don't incorporate in this kind of reviews. Like, I saw La Esmeralda last year, and I remember, I think from an interview, the director said that he wanted to use this kind of European Latin and go to different countries. And when I watched it, I was like, yeah, I don't see any of that in coming back in the review. This idea of different countries, of different cultures from European Latin countries, which I thought was a shame. It was such a good opportunity to shake things up a little bit more.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Lisa, how about you? Anything you'd get rid of or anything you want to see more of?
I'm probably going to get so many stones thrown at me for now, but I would be perfectly fine if we could just put off Versailles Nobara and Kaze no Tomo for the next 5 years.
Basically all the way to Shinju shows.
I would be so happy if we could just do that. I mean, I get the appeal, I get the boom, I get that it's very important. But there is only so much glittering Goran Nasai that I can even remotely put up with.
Although I have to say, the last episode that everybody did on this podcast, the Valentine's Day one, everybody really loved Season of Angels. That was an Ueda Shinji show.
Yes.
I mean...
So he's got that weird comedy side, too.
Can we then please have more comedy and less Goran Nasai? Is that a thing? Could that be a thing? I would love that. But I also... But I also maintain that Season of Angels did have a rough script at best. I am still sure there was a lot of improvisation in that one.
Yeah.
What I also want to get rid of is this unfortunate shade of orange that some of the makeup has when they're trying to do Southern reviews.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, I was literally so scared when they were doing Oedipus, and I saw from the stills that Koma and Mitsuru, Sao Kurama, and Hanagata Hikaru both had gone for darker makeup. And it looked fine on the stills, and I was scared until the very moment they came onto stage that they would be orange in the stage lighting. Thank God they were not. But apparently it's possible to do a nice natural tan without looking like a carrot. So, I don't know. Could we work on this?
I have to say, though, it rubs off very nicely on the cuffs of the white shirts. Whenever they do that tanning makeup, like everybody's white costumes are suddenly orange.
What I do want to see more of is more Musume Yaku actually getting the female lead roles that they should be getting. I'll just take Soragumi's A Song for Kingdoms as an example. That was announced, and in my head I was going, oh, Misaki Rion would be so good as Aida. And then 5 seconds later my head went, yep, they're going to give it to Nanami Hiroki because she's an Otokoyaku. And it was only when they transferred Nanami Hiroki out and Makaze Suzuho in that I dared to hope that we might actually get Misaki Rion as Aida, because as much as Yurika has improved her singing, I don't think there is any world in which she can hit Aida's notes. I really don't think so. I think her natural voice is too deep.
Asaka Manato as well.
They have been doing a lot of love scenes
for
Graph and on pictures. I think they would be comfortable with that.
Lisa, can you give some examples of some of the big onayaku roles that Otokoyaku got?
Do you want me to start with Oscar after I've just ranted about Versailles Nobara, or...
We can skip Oscar. I think everybody knows that one.
Well, Aida, for example, I think should have gone to a Musume-yaku. I think Scarlet should have gone to a Musume-yaku. I just think that as soon as... At least it appears like that sometimes. As soon as a character is not exactly this very feminine type of proper daughter role, or in Scarlet's case, Scarlet can come across as really bratty, you just pick an Otokoyaku with a nice higher register who looks cute in a dress, and then you have your casting. While you have a row of perfectly fine Musume-yaku who could be doing it. And who would do it in an awesome way, I might add. That Manaki Reika, for example, that she did not get Scarlet, that made me really sad. Because I think she would have been an awesome Scarlet. Okay, that is a different problem, because then we would have had the problem of where to put the actual top star if Todoroki Yuu is with the troupe. But same for Soragumi's Gone with the Wind. I would have been perfectly fine with Misaki Rion as Scarlet.
Now, I wonder if this is something we could, I don't know if I want to use the word blame, but we could say it depends on the directors, because I know some of these shows tend to be older directors who also work outside of the review a lot, and maybe they bring those expectations back in of like what they're looking for. I know like Koike Sensei, when he did the 2 Tsukigumi Elizabeths, he cast Otokoyaku as Elizabeth both times. He had Senna June, and then he had Nagina Rumi. And I remember they didn't announce the cast for the 2009 for a long time, and I heard they were holding audition after audition, and he auditioned like all of Moon Troop, and then he started auditioning the other troops, and that's how Nagina Rumi ended up coming over from Cosmos. And we were all like, yeah, please. Like, there were plenty of awesome Musume-yaku, but maybe they just have these high expectations and they're looking for the perfect actress. I don't know.
I have to say,
I think the star system also plays a role in this, especially for shows like Gone with the Wind, where there just aren't that many named roles. There's no real place to put those Otokoyaku that you want to give a prominent spot to. Also, shows where they give smaller Musume-yaku or Onayaku roles to Otokoyaku, like Diamond and Girl, or recently Guys and Dolls as well.
Yeah, I think, what did I want to say? Damn it. Somebody else say something and I'll think about what I actually wanted to say. Okay, I got it again. I think Sena Jun as Elizabeth made sense in a certain way because Ayaki Nao simply did not have a partner at this point. And putting her into Elizabeth
and Sena Jun didn't have either.
Yeah, she was still Nibante. Yeah, right. When she did Elizabeth, she also didn't. I was in 2005, sorry. But putting her as Elizabeth made sense in the way that she was going to take over this troupe, and maybe she should at least have played one full show with them.
I don't think they had announced it at that point.
No, but
though.
I think
she was still in.
No, but I think they knew that she was going to. At least the management should have known that this was their next top star. And to be fair, Sena Jun is vocally my favorite Elizabeth. Takarazuka Elizabeth, I mean. Yeah, I like that she's not quite as high as the other ones. I do have 15 categories on who is my favorite for what reason. For Elizabeth. But I really liked her singing as Elizabeth, and I think it made sense to give her a prominent role for this production because people who were fans of the troupe had to know her somehow. Nagina Rumi, on the other hand, I don't think they did her a favor by making her play Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it did much for her career. In any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
and
she's interesting. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen to her.
But in this case, I would have been fine with Shirosaki Ai, for example, playing Elizabeth. I would have gone to see that.
Yeah, she would have been very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to cut us off there and give Jeanette a chance to answer the question of, is there anything you would get rid of or add to Takarazuka?
I think I'm going to second Carol's opinion about the Latin reviews, but
nobody likes bell pens.
I haven't thought about that much until I met Carol, to be honest, but she gave me a lot of good ideas about rethinking my opinion. And yes, by now I say Latin reviews are awful. Period. But I think we can stretch it out to other scenes in reviews where they should do some more research and not stick to the stereotype, which of course differs from country to country and culture to culture about other cultures. But I remember, I think it was in, I think Riot Straight Flush, where they had this really, really awful I think it was meant to be a casino. And everyone was in this more or less traditional, what's the correct
Native
word?
American
Costumes.
Oh no!
And I even can't remember the song of that scene because I skip it. It makes me so angry when I see the scene.
Yeah, I have the same with the Native Americans in Zorro as well. Their costumes are interesting.
Oh god.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think it's interesting as an American to hear that, because a lot of the times I feel like sometimes Americans are very defensive about things that we've done in the past, like terrible stereotypes of African Americans and Native Americans. And sometimes I think maybe other cultures aren't quite as sensitive of that because maybe they're like, they don't perceive themselves as being guilty of it. So it's interesting to hear that Europeans are just as offended by these terrible Native American headdresses.
It's basically the same when they pull out the...
Takarazuka does blackface makeup.
Yes.
Because
yes.
It makes me cringe. It's awful. I don't like it.
Oh. Another thing that could go, this strange, we dress someone up in a sexy Nazi uniform.
Oh,
yes,
please
get rid of
yes.
that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's very disturbing.
I mean, I get that their history after World War II is different from our history, but could we at least not with the symbols on their hats and the binds around the arm? Could we at least leave those out?
Yes, please.
And do we have to make them sinisterly sexy characters?
Yes.
That's always really
Could
disturbing.
they please be assholes and just get their butts kicked? That would really...
Whenever a character in one of those uniforms appears on stage, it makes me really uncomfortable.
Yes.
In the German Elisabeth, there is a scene that they left out for the Takarazuka version, or the I think every version outside of Europe, I think. The song is called Hate, and it's about the establishment of that movement. And that makes me really uncomfortable as well. So
you can usually
I need to be more
tell.
careful with stuff like that in general.
You can usually tell when they play Hass, because that's the song where nobody applauds and people just sit there and wait for it to be over.
Yeah.
Interesting that they've kept it through so many iterations. I've seen it because I've seen the Vienna version.
Oh, nice.
So I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it is. It's uncomfortable.
I can see why it's in there, but I think it is not appropriate for any audience that does not have this background of National Socialism, because they all don't need that reminder. And I think it should also come with a warning, because it's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
I was shocked the first time I saw it.
Right now I can see the use of this song, actually, because with the refugee crisis and stuff, there have been certain people who think that they can talk like that again in Germany. And when we saw Elizabeth last weekend, for example, they also had skinheads in the song for the first time, which usually doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But which was a commentary on how it's right now and that we should still be on our guard. But I don't think that this reminder and this way of telling people, look what you did, don't let it happen again, is necessary for any cultural circle that is not the circle who did this back then. And it's certainly not sexy or great in any way.
Yes, exactly.
That's the thing, I think, how you portray it. Yeah. Okay, let's get back onto a happier subject.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's really interesting and it's very appropriate, like timing-wise. But I wasn't going to add anything, but I think I have to speak up in defense of the Latin review. I'm sorry, just because there've been, I have to be that little defensive voice. I can totally understand, but at the same time, I'm in love with those ruffle costumes because they are so insane. You're not going to see them like anywhere else, not to the degree that Takarazuka does them. So when I see one, I'm like, yes, this is Takarazuka. And this also pulls into the other thing that you guys didn't like. I also really love in the Latin reviews when they dress up the otokoyaku in the female costumes and they have them dancing with the top star. And they tend to do that a lot too. I don't know. It always just seems to be very, very sexy. I think it's fun.
I don't mind it when they do that. I mind it when it's fully grown roles in actual plays. I don't mind putting them into dresses for the review. That's fine. Put them into dresses all you want.
But it always makes me think of, in the first Appassionato, it was Senna June, Kiriya Hiromu, and they had this Latin dance number that I was lucky enough to see it live like a million times. And every night it was just like shivers up and down my spine. It was really cool. So I have to love the Latin review.
The one thing that makes me watch Rio de Bravo again is the amount of glitter, to be honest. Because especially in the when they come down the stairs, even the stairs glitter. Not only their costumes, but even the stairs. And whenever I'm sad and really want to watch something that makes me happier, I'm going back to that one. But still, in general, I don't like it.
That's okay, I still love you.
Thank you.
I think Carol would be the first person to speak up for more Latin reviews if there was some more research behind it.
Yeah. So the thing with Rio de Bravo, for example, is I was looking at the pamphlet for it, the program, and every scene name is in Spanish, which is not the language they speak in Brazil.
Yeah.
Which was the thing that I was like, this is such an easy thing to get, like 2 seconds of Wikipedia.
Yes.
Now, what was the show that they did recently where they actually brought over a dance instructor from Argentina? Was that for a review was that
it was in 2014, I think Hoshigumi review, with the awful orange makeup.
I'm thinking of something older. No, what was it? All
Wasn't
right,
it-
now I'm gonna have to look it
I
up.
think it was Passionate. They had a choreographer
I was
from
thinking
overseas.
of Aran K's Review Orchis. Has anybody seen that one? It was 2007, 2008.
No.
They brought a dance instructor for an Aran K review.
A tango choreographer, Oscar Ares? I remember it was big news. Like, they were doing all these articles about the fact that they had this guy come over at the time. I've only seen the review once, and I don't remember it that well. And I'm not a dancer, so I don't have that background to say if it improved the dancing or not. But
I know they brought for the choreographer who did the choreography for Argent Tango also did for one scene in Passionate Takarazuka.
Now I will have to watch Passionate Takarazuka for that one scene.
Don't.
I'll have to
it's very
find out.
orange. It's really orange.
But the choreographer was damn amazing when he was working with the OG, so I hope that the dancing is nice.
No, the dancing was good, but it's really orange. If you don't like orange makeup, just don't.
Sexy tango dancing carrots, okay.
I'm gonna move us on because I think we could spend forever on this, and I'm gonna open it up to our listeners. So, what do you think, listeners? Is there anything that you would take out of Takarazuka, or anything you would like to see more of in Takarazuka? And I think we'll do a couple more questions, and then we can save the other questions for another Q&A episode because this is fun.
It is.
Let's do some commercial questions. We had a couple questions about books. Let's do those. There's one question about Graph magazine, which was, does Graph have, or did Graph ever have anything about stage costumes in general? And this was from a fan who couldn't read Japanese, so they were looking for pictures particularly. And I know both Caroline and Lisa said they had something to tell us about that. So let's start with Caroline.
Well, for recent Graph, they have this feature called The Costume, where the top star and top Musumiya could select one costume from the current Grand Theatre show, and they get to show it off. They have one full body picture, full front body picture in one page, and then on the other page they have detailed pictures, sometimes of the makeup, earrings, accessories, sometimes of the bag or the shoes, things that you don't usually get to see on stage, or that don't usually get shown on normal stage pictures. So if you like more details in pictures or like to see those things that are usually hidden, for example, shoes covered by a dress, it's a lot of fun to read and look at. Graph in general has very good quality stage pictures, usually for all shows that they put on. So in general, Graph is a good source for the costumes. And they have this another section called Another Stage, I believe. Oh no, side selection, which is where they post pictures taken from the wings of the stage. So they're usually pictures taken from the side instead of the frontal pictures that you usually get, which usually gives a different view of the costumes, which can also be really interesting for people who are interested in them.
Great. Lisa, did you have anything to add?
For bigger shows like Versailles Nobara, Gone with the Wind, yes, all that stuff I complained about, and Elizabeth too, there usually are also collection MOOCs, like for Elizabeth they did two, one that spanned from 96 to 2002, and one that then covered the costumes from 2005 and 2007, and they had really detailed costume shots and shots of all costumes, so that you could see what Todd was actually wearing in all scenes, even in the group scenes where there might not be as much camera focus on him on the DVD. And it really made it possible to see what kind of fabric they used or what kind of pattern there was in the fabric. So those are really interesting too. But it only happens for shows that are appropriately big and have the following to print such books, I guess.
That's really cool. There was actually another costuming question I'm going to slip in here because I think it fits with that, which was somebody wanted to know how come the Takarazuka outfits are so awesomely shiny, and they were wondering because they didn't think rhinestones could get that kind of sparkle, so they were wondering if it might be Swarovski crystal or something else. And Jeanette had some interesting things to talk about with the crystal, so I thought I would throw that at her.
Actually, I have no real fact about it, but I think the Swarovski crystal thing could be true, because actually those you can use for sewing onto fabric aren't that heavy and still shiny. Like they're equal to those more cheaper plastic or glassy rhinestones. And I think someone earlier threw in that Swarovski crystals might be too expensive, but I think those you can actually use for clothes or costumes aren't that expensive, because you don't get they're not that huge usually. But I don't think I think for especially the final review costumes, or the final costumes in general for the Tokoyaku Top Star, which are usually really shiny, I don't think what they're used for that, especially since the entire fabric sometimes is sparkling. Like it must be some pre-made sparkle effect. Like they already buy the fabric as it is, and I have no idea how that is done.
I was thinking about this because we talked about it earlier and I wasn't sure at the time, but if you go to the museums or if you're in Tokyo, sometimes they have displays up on the second and third floor in the Shanter department store. You can actually kind of lean close and take a look at the costumes, and they actually tend to be sequins. And we were talking about, is it always sequins? And I suddenly remembered watching a backstage show where the costumers actually like sew on those sequins. Sometimes they have to hand sew them on. So,
oh my god!
I mean, that is an amazing amount of effort. If you think about how many Otokoyaku and Musumeyaku too have these extremely sparkly costumes, and I think most of them are just simply sequins going crazy. And I remember before sequins became like super available and cheap, like back in the war years and before that, they actually used to use fish scales to try and get that sparkly shine to the costumes, which I thought was kind of cool. But Lisa had something to talk about with the Takarazuka actually building pieces of their costumes on their own, not through the costuming department.
I think if it's something special that's that you can't just make in great numbers for a lot of people, the Siens usually have to take care of that themselves. Like special boots, for example, I think they have to buy themselves. And the famous Elizabeth tote boots, the sparkly one, I think in Mizunatsuki's case it was Shirahane Yuri who made them for her, as in who put all the decoration on the boots, so that Miso would be an appropriately sparkly tote. And for accessories or jewelry that is worn during the review, I think most of them are also bought by the Siens themselves, or they're given to them by a friend or the person who plays their partner in the review, for example. So they sometimes also pick stuff for each other.
I think sometimes they take things that fans give them.
Some of them also wear fan presents for graph photo shoots.
I was going to throw in that the Musumeyaku usually do their headpieces themselves. Like the sparkly things that keep their hair in order, for example, or when the top Musumeyaku wears a shiny crown at the end of the review. Usually they're made or self-made by the actresses, as far as I know. Because that's also something they can't produce in bulk for everyone.
I was just going to say, I remember, now that Jeanette said that, there were some comics where they were kind of telling you backstage stuff going on in Graph a couple years ago, and I can't remember which show it was, but it was one of the Otokoyaku who had a female role for that show, and they actually had to go to their Musumeyaku classmate and be like, help me, I don't know how to make the hair pieces. So they had to have a little craft session. Because the Musumeyaku are extreme experts on that kind of thing.
That is adorable.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say,
and
what
that
I
also
always
explains
think,
why the hair pieces are sometimes different.
yes, what I always think about when there is talk about hair pieces and stuff is the one program on Sky Stage when Yukigumi was traveling to Vienna in 2007 for Elizabeth preparation, And when they were in the museum, in the Elizabeth Museum, you could actually see Shirahane Yuri counting the amount of diamond stars that was in Elizabeth's hair when she was wearing the winter halter dress. Like, she was actually they have a wig on display with the stars in it, with replicas of the stars, so you can count how many it were. And then afterwards you saw them in the museum shop and you could see her just buying, 20 of those star replicas. I suppose for her own Elizabeth wig, and maybe for the girl who played the Shinjin Koen too, because she bought a lot of them.
That's cool.
I don't know if...
I remember...
If all Musume who played Elizabeth did it, because we don't have that on camera, but I know that Shirahane Yuri apparently did. She probably didn't feel like handcrafting 12 diamond stars.
I remember hearing a story when Ryu Masaki and Seijo Kaiso were doing the Shinjin Koen for Rome at Dawn, which was that Julius Caesar Shakespeare show we were talking about earlier that Tom did in Moon Troop. And that also had the Otokoyaku top star boots. And I guess they got yelled at because they made their boots like cooler than Todoroki Yuu and Sana Jun's boots. So they got scolded and they had to redo them and make them all over again so they weren't cooler than the actual show's boots.
Oh no.
How do you dare outsparkle me, disciple? Do you think there is a certain sparkle quota? How much sparkle you're allowed when you're doing Shinjin Koen?
Probably. Oh man.
I love that story.
I'm going to ask one more question for Caroline, and then I think just to wrap it up and make sure we don't miss anything anybody had their hearts set on, if everybody wants to pick maybe one question that we didn't talk about to finish, you can take a look at them while Caroline is talking, but
no pressure.
I'll have Caroline answer, and then I'll answer a question so Caroline can think. But Caroline, what do you think are the best books in English about the Takarazuka review?
Okay, so I actually wrote my bachelor thesis on Takarazuka last year, and it had me looking through a lot of material. I wouldn't say these are the best books available. There's not that many material in terms of books about the review. But those are the ones I personally found more useful. One is Berling Zeke's Takarazuka. It's an older book from '88. It's about as old as I am, but it has a lot of interesting information about the review at the time, about its history. If you're interested in when they started doing foreign productions, it also has interesting information about that. Troupe formation, fan activities. It's a good startup book from that era. Another one I would recommend is, wait, let me check my list. Where is it? It's a recent book that came out by Makiko Yamanashi called A History of the Takarazuka Review since 1914, and it was released in 2012, which gives a very good history lesson about how the review got started, about its founder, about how certain trends of the era influenced things that happened in Takarazuka at the time, like the changes in how women were perceived, for example. If you're interested in history and how history in Japan is related to the history of the review, recommended read. If you're interested in more things like gender studies, I highly recommend Leonie Stickland's Gender Gymnastics from 2004. She did a few interviews with Takarazianis and with other people of fans as well, and I feel that it gives a very balanced view of the gender relations within and outside of Takarazuka, how that is for, at least for the Takarazianis themselves, and also for the fans. So those would be my top 3 recommendations. Yes.
Is there a book you would recommend people not read?
Well, you already know the answer to that. I think that a lot of fans are familiar with this when they start looking at Takarazuka books in English. The first one most people encounter is Jennifer Robinson's Takarazuka, Sexual Politics and Popular Culture in Modern Japan from 1998. when I started writing my thesis, my supervisor actually was the only book he knew about Takarazuka, and was like, "Are you going to read Jennifer Robertson?" And I mean, it's interesting. If you have time to spare, read it, I guess, but read it critically, because I've spoken to a lot of fans who've done academics about Takarazuka, and most of them agree that this is not a good book. Don't read it expecting to read facts. Yes, read it critically. I think it's a good to exercise your critical thinking about scholarship on theater and gender. But if you are interested in better stuff, skip it.
Yeah, I remember hearing that after she did that book, and she had some contact with the review when she did, interviews and things, I guess they were kind of livid about what she ended up publishing and some of the things that she said. And for years after that, they would not speak with any Western scholars who wanted to publish anything. So it took a long time for trust to be built back up after that book was published.
Which says a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm looking through, and for my closing question, I'm going to grab someone asked about tickets, and they said they wanted to go to a Tokyo performance, but it looks like tickets don't go on sale until a month beforehand. And is this timing common for Takarazuka tickets? And I would have to say yes. Most tickets for the Grand Theater and the Tokyo Theater only go on sale about a month before the show starts. And depending on the popularity of the show, they might sell out pretty quickly. So that's one problem with the ticketing system in Takarazuka. However, there are ways to circumvent that. One way, if you don't want to join a fan club, if you're living in Japan, or even if you're not and you can get access to it, if you sign up for any of their ticketing systems like Ticketpia or Lawson's ticket system, they have online options. And if you become a member and join so that you get an account there to buy the tickets, sometimes they have a lottery ahead of time. And I did that often for shows. And you actually, I think it's like, it gives you an extra month to an extra couple weeks where you can put in for tickets. You won't necessarily get the best tickets, but you're guaranteed a ticket that way. So that is one way to circumvent worrying about when the general ticket sales start. And the other is if you're in a fan club, make sure you set aside your money a little earlier to buy the tickets, because their deadlines are usually a couple of months before tickets go on sale. And you usually don't get a lot of warning. You'll get your ticket ordering form and they'll be like, next week, the ticketing form is due. And you're like, oh, oops, I don't have any money yet. So be careful. But depending on the fan club and their rank, you're usually guaranteed to get your tickets if you order them. Sometimes you order S seats, and depending on what they're available, they might lower your ticket. They might be like, okay, we couldn't get S seats for that day, but we got a B for you. So that's another way to get tickets.
And you can also get it to friends who are in clubs. If they're in clubs who are starting that particular performance, usually they're allowed to order for non-club members as well.
Yeah, not only that, they're usually encouraged to do that, because the more tickets that the club orders, the better, the more popular their star looks. So definitely, if you know somebody who's in a fan club and you know you're going to go see the show and you want to help them, that'll usually help them get, little goodies through their club too. So check it out.
They're always thankful.
So make a list, which one of your friends is in which club, and make sure to always ask them first about tickets.
Yes, that sounds like a good plan. Same goes for goodies like calendars and things. Sometimes if you want like a top star calendar, they might be selling them through the fan club, and you can help them out if they sell a lot. So yeah. All right, Lisa, do you want to start with your final question?
Yes, and I think my final question was the question about that a fan sent in who was a bit confused about the ranking system in Takarazuka. So I'm going to read the question first. I'm never sure what CN is in what position, like Nibante, Sanbante, etc. Are those titles actual professional positions, or just like general roles that they usually have? And I think this is a very good and very interesting question, because the ranking can be more or less confusing depending on the troupe. All the more because it's not usually an official position like top star or top musumeyaku, but it's something everyone in the troupe at least is aware of where certain people stand. So if you do have a Sien that is, I think, relatively close to the top star in age, because of course seniority also plays a role here, and usually gets the second biggest male role, or the second most important one, then you have a Nibante. Some Bante can be a bit trickier, because I've noticed that some troupes tend to, well, rotate or not have a stable Sam Bante at all, but more like a group of people that a potential Sam Bante could come from. For example, Soragumi's ranking right now is quite clear, with Asaka Manato as top star, Makaze Suzuho as Nibante for male roles, and Aizuki Hikaru as Sambante. But there are certain troupes where it's a lot more complicated and where you probably have to play some guessing games. What also usually is a good indicator is when the Sien in question comes down during the final parade, because the parade also usually goes by ranking, which means the person coming right before the top musumeyaku is usually going to be the Nibante. Would you like to add anything? Maybe some help for the more complicated troops?
I think sometimes the calendars that are released at the end of the year for the next year are also a good indicator.
Yes.
Whether they get only a poster calendar with 2 sides, or one of those you can flip with, I think, 6 pictures inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a personal calendar.
Yeah, a personal calendar, thank you.
Usually just the top stars and the Nibante, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
That
one.
is.
Cool. I think another thing might be they're not TCA specials anymore. What do they call them? They're just the specials. Those tend to be, like, you can usually see the top star, top musumeyaku, and the Nibante. Sometimes they're all on the poster, so that might help too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Jeanette, how about you? Do you have a final question for us?
Yes, and it's I think more a fun one. I got really attached to the question or the suggestion to imagine that after death you're reincarnated as a Japanese girl who's eventually accepted into Takarazuka Music School. What type of Takarazian would you dream to become? Musumeyaku or Otokoyaku, legendary top star, short-lived supporting player? Would your specialty be singing, dancing, acting, or all three? And what troupe would you be in? Would you end up in Senka? Feel free to describe as much as or as little as you like. And I instantly had an idea for myself. Considering my voice right now, I would probably more likely to become an Otokoyaku. And personally, I would either prefer Yukigumi or Soragumi. But I wouldn't like to be top star at all. More like the career path Seijo Kaito has behind her and is up to her. Like, she was always there, you always recognize her, but she was never meant to be top star, I think, and I really like that she right now ended up in Senka, and that's something I would like for myself too.
Secretly, we all want to be Maggie, I agree.
Let's all answer that one, because I think that's a fun question.
Yeah.
Who wants to go next?
Not all at once.
Jeanette, just pick someone.
Jen, what about you?
All right. I'll call someone. Lisa, how about you?
Since I just heard that Musumeyaku have to do arts and crafts and I have 2 left hands, I'm definitely not going to become a Musumeyaku in any shape or form. I would probably be the shortest Otokoyaku of the company. And I would be one of those people who would have to lie about their Otokoyaku hate being 168 when I'm clearly not. Because I have a feeling if they are lying, they're all saying 168. And I think I would like to be someone like Ema Naoki. Because I feel like she got some of the most fun roles in Takarazuka plays, and I like the idea of being allowed to be Senka's goofball, more or less.
Yes.
Because you get to go places and it just seems really fun.
That would be fun. All right. Caroline, how about you?
Yeah, I think I also would end up being a little koyaku with my height and my singing range. Musumiyaku is out of the question. Yes, and also I don't think I could be so cute all the time. I too would not want to be top star. I don't usually care very well when people are paying attention to me. I think like if I had to choose a career path, I would like to be something like Fukukomicho or Komicho because they get some really fun roles, especially since Shushi-san in Soragomi. She gets the best old best grumpy old man roles ever, and it always looks like so much fun to play. So yeah, I think that's what I would end up doing.
That's so much fun.
What about you, Jen?
Yeah, I have to make a confession here. Probably about 10 years ago, a group of us who were really close Takarazuka fans, we actually started a comic. We made ourselves the characters. And the artist was Teffy. I don't know if anyone here knows Teffy.
I've seen her.
She was amazing.
I've seen her art. Yes.
Yeah, she was a wonderful artist and a really good friend. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago, so we miss her a lot. But yeah, so she drew all of us as Otokoyaku and Musumeyaku. It was a lot of fun. But I think if I was reincarnated, I would want to be an otokoyaku like Hinata-san of Flower Troupe. I don't know if anybody knows Mame, but she was amazing. She was not really star-tracked. She did have a kind of a big role in one of their Bauhaus workshops when she was younger. But she was hilarious, and she was so sweet to her fans. I got to go to a couple of her ojukai, and I actually started following her as an OG, and she was just hugely friendly, but she was also, like, super hilarious on stage. If you've ever seen some of the reviews and shows she did just before she retired, she just had a lot of great, like, little character roles that kind of made the shows. And for those of you who have seen... God, I'm blanking. Oh, why am I blanking? God, what was the review that they did? Why is it not showing up on her on Wikipedia? This is making me sad. Oh, God, there it is. Exciter, which is one of the best reviews ever. But she played... Yes, Exciter is awesome. And she played this, like... pervert on the subway. Her job was like to be this pervert, and it was hilarious. So yes, I would be Hinata-san, and I would do the little comic touch roles, I think, if I were in Takarazuka.
It also just occurred to me that all Germans are, because of their language, designated to be grumpy old grandpa roles.
Oh, I forgot about the specialty. I'm sorry. I left that out when I answered the question. I think my I can't pronounce it. I'm sorry. The thing I would be best at would be singing, I think.
Cool.
Because I'm really awkward when I have to dance. I can't dance. And when someone tells me I should dance, it's like, no, I can't. It looks ridiculous. Someone might get hurt. You don't want me to dance.
Oh, you're Mizu.
If you dance, you won't be Mizu. Throwing people off the stage left and right.
Oh, I didn't mean to break your nose. I'm sorry.
Mizu actually can dance, to be honest. But Toko can't, so I would be Toko, I think. Great voice. No. Doesn't like to dance.
Awesome. Okay, who did I miss? I know there's one more person who has to do their final question.
I guess me?
Carol.
Okay. Yeah.
The question I picked was the one about doing Japanese magazine subscriptions. The question was, I was wondering who the best company to go to for a Japanese magazine subscription is now. Does anyone have any recommendation of services that they have used or are using? This depends a lot on where you live. I know that Kinokuniya, if you live in a place that has Kinokuniya or maybe other Japanese bookstores, they usually have a kind of subscription service that you can get magazines like Graph or Kageki from, or perhaps even the Song. Usually stores like that, if it can't be ordered online, they have a way of ordering for you. Another option would be going to a shopping service. There are dozens of that. The one that I personally use and I recommend is called Visual Shocks. I will put on the link on the page for this podcast episode. And they do a lot of personalized services for people who live outside of Japan, like helping you to join fan clubs, helping you to go to auctions, purchasing tickets. And they also do subscriptions for magazines or other things that require a Japanese address. The way it works is usually you send the money for the subscription to them through PayPal, and then they message you every month or whenever your magazine arrives, quoting the shipping. You pay for shipping, they send it to you. For me, living in the Netherlands, it usually arrives within 1 week. And they're great, they're super friendly and super helpful, so I definitely recommend them if you don't have a bookstore or a place nearby that you can order things to.
Very cool. Living in North America, my information is very outdated because I used to get subscriptions, but that was like 10 years ago. I used to go through Sasuga because I lived in Boston, and I don't think they do it anymore. But there are some other Japanese bookstores. I know, especially if you live in a city on the east or the west coast, like Kinokuniya, you can get subscriptions through them. And sometimes you usually have to call and tell them specifically what you want, because otherwise they'll be like, no, we don't carry that magazine. But if you say you want a subscription, they can get it for you. Sometimes you can order it so you can pick it up there, and that's usually cheaper than having them ship it to you. Man, there used to be BK1, but I think they got bought out by Honto Japan, and I don't think they offer it anymore. I know CD Japan used to do subscriptions. I also don't know if they still do that. So if any listeners have any information on how if they get a subscription instead of just picking up individual issues, I would love to know, because I actually think I should pick up my subscription again. It's been a while. Anybody else have any info on subscribing to the magazines?
Nothing more useful than Carol, I think.
No. She had a good answer. All right. Well, I know we had a ton more questions. We'll have to save them for next time. Listeners, if you have any other questions for us, we would love to hear them. Definitely leave them at our blog, which is at caithion.net, caithion.net/Takarazuka podcast. Thank you for listening. We love doing these podcasts, and we hope that they're useful to you, or at least entertaining. And I guess that's all for today. Thank you. Many thanks to Michael B. and the Arcanum String Quartet for their wonderful arrangement of Sumire no Hana Sakugoro. And thank you, listeners, for enjoying our podcast.